Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are tackling one of life's really tough questions. When you've been seriously, deeply wronged, what's the right thing to do? We're going to dive into a sermon that is a pretty surprising take on this whole idea of vengeance versus vindication.
So should you take matters into your own hands, or is justice something you need to wait for? It's a huge dilemma, right? Well, this sermon unpacks that question, using some incredible ancient stories, and it offers a really compelling way to think about it.
All right, so to get us started, we're jumping into this really famous and honestly pretty chilling Korean folktale. It's a story that perfectly captures what it feels like to have a grievance so deep it literally echoes beyond the grave. At the heart of this whole thing are two innocent sisters, Jung-hwa and Hong-leon. Now, they become the victims of their cruel and super jealous stepmother, who actually plots their deaths. I mean, it's a classic setup for a story about a horrible, horrible injustice. But here's where it gets even worse, if you can believe it. The injustice gets so much deeper because it turns into this profound betrayal. Their own father, he was in on it. He knew what was happening, and he just chose to do nothing. He completely abandoned them.
So, their sense of being wronged is so powerful that they actually come back as ghosts. They start appearing before every new official in town, just crying out for justice. And most of these officials literally die of fright until finally one brave guy actually listens to their story, investigates, and uncovers the stepmother's terrible crime.
And get this is the part that will really give you chills. This isn't just some made-up folktale. The sermon points out that it's actually based on a real murder case from 17th century Korea. That just grounds the whole thing in this terrifying reality.
Okay, so how do we even begin to understand a feeling this intense? Well, the sermon introduces these two ancient Chinese characters that give us this powerful visual way to get a handle on it.
So the first character is one, and if you look at it, it literally shows a rabbit trapped under a cover. It's meant to symbolize not just, feeling angry, but the actual objective state of being wronged, of being cornered, falsely accused with no way out.
So if one is the problem, the trapped rabbit, what's the solution? Well, you find it in the word Shinwan. It combines that first character with the character for stretch. It's this brilliant picture of what vindication feels like. A person who is trapped is now finally able to stand up and stretch freely. The wrong has been made right.
Okay, now we're heading to the absolute heart of the sermon's case study. We're going to a dark cave where a man on the run faces the ultimate test between getting revenge and showing restraint. And the stakes here, they could not be higher. We have the future king, David, who is on the run for his life. And he's not just being chased, he's being hunted by the current king, Saul, with an army of 3,000 of the best soldiers in the kingdom.
You can just imagine it, right? David and his small group of followers are completely exhausted, they're desperate, and they're hiding way back in the darkest corners of a cave out in the wilderness, just trying to escape the king's paranoid fury. And then, in a twist you just couldn't make up, King Saul himself, the very man trying to kill him, walks right into that same cave, by himself. And he's just there to relieve himself, totally unaware that his mortal enemy is watching from the shadows, completely and utterly defenseless. I mean, can you even imagine the tension in that cave? David's men are whispering like crazy. To them, this is a sign from God. It's the perfect chance for revenge, the end of all their running and suffering. The throne is literally one sword thrust away. So, this is it, the big moment. Every instinct, every grievance he's ever felt, and every one of his followers is screaming at him to do one thing. But David makes a choice that absolutely no one sees coming. He doesn't raise his sword. He doesn't kill Saul. Instead, he just creeps forward in the dark and quietly cuts off a corner of the king's robe. That's all. In fact, the story says he immediately felt guilty for even doing that much. And why he does this is the whole point. He tells his men that he cannot harm Saul because the king was appointed by a higher power. From David's point of view, the right to judge the king, to punish him, it just didn't belong to him. And this single choice is really the sermon's core argument. If David had killed Saul, it would have been a coup, right? An act of personal revenge. But by holding back, he chose a totally different path. He chose to trust in Shinwan, or divine vindication, this belief that a higher justice would resolve the situation in its own time. So, what are we supposed to do with all of this? How does this apply to us?
Well, the sermon boils David's choice down into a really practical framework for any of us when we're facing our own enemy in a cave moments.
It's really a three-step process. First, you've got to acknowledge the grievance. Face that feeling of being the trapped rabbit. Don't pretend it's not there. Second, you consciously give up your right to get revenge. You put the knife down. And third, you entrust the final outcome, the Shinwon, the resolution, to a higher power.
And this is so important to get. The sermon isn't saying you should just be a pushover or passively let people walk all over you. It's arguing that this is an act of incredible strength and faith. It's a strategy to free yourself from the poison of bitterness so that true justice can happen without consuming you in the process.
So in the end, it all comes down to this one question. When you feel trapped, when the world seems completely unfair, and maybe the power to strike back is right there in your hands, what do you do? This sermon suggests that the path to real vindication, to finally being able to stretch free, might not be the one you think it is.